morning. It is 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, time for another episode of First Chapter Fun. Good morning everyone, how are you? Good morning Jennifer, good morning Glennie, I almost said Amanda there. So this is the place, there's Amanda, good morning. This is the place where every day until May the 6th, 8th, something around there, I am reading the first chapter of a different book, not my books, but those of my wonderful author friends, every day at 11:30 Eastern Time, right here on Instagram Live and on Facebook Live. Yes, the wonders of modern technology, or having a couple of devices. I have my phone up here and my decades old, not quite, but my very old, the family iPad down here because I steal it for this episode. Good morning Hank, good morning Dale, good morning Glennie. It's wonderful to see so many people today. This is absolutely great. It's a very strange day in Oakville today. It's bright blue skies and sunshine right now, but we had snow, almost like not a storm, that would be exaggerating, but there was a lot of snow coming down and it's all gone again. So it's very weird. It's an epic battle between spring and winter that's going on, and I'm hoping that spring is going to win very soon. Kaylee has joined. Good morning. She says, I so can't wait to hear this. We have Heather Chavez. I'm reading from Heather's book tomorrow. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And let me introduce you to today's book. I'm excited about this one and have quite a funny anecdote and some story behind the story, kind of. So we have today, there we go, if I turn that, look at that lovely cover, the Jane Austen Society. If I turn it a little bit, I know it's a bit weird, but you should be, there we go. Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. Now, Natalie and I actually live in the same town, and she was also born in England, as I was too. Her husband's name is Rob, as is mine, so all very, very these funny coincidences. So Natalie, this is her debut, and she should be joining us any minute if she finds us either on Facebook or Instagram or both. But as always, I will be, good morning Sanika, lovely to see you. I will be posting these videos as always to Instagram and also to my Facebook page. Please leave some questions. Natalie has just joined. She says, I've never done this before, but I think I am here. You're here, Natalie, safe and sound. You've arrived for First Chapter Fun, so pleased. Oh, and I have Pam Hunt, family member watching from Connecticut. That's so lovely. I'm so glad you were able to join. So I'm going to show you the cover again now that Natalie has joined us. Let me show you the cover of her gorgeous book. This is her debut, historical fiction, the Jane Austen Society. Look at that. Isn't that a lovely cover? It doesn't really do it justice on this little tablet because there's so much glare, but it is a gorgeous book. So let me tell you a little bit more about Natalie. My neighbour, well, same town anyway, but this is Natalie's bio. Natalie Jenner is the author of the Jane Austen Society, which, by the way, publishes on May 26th. We also share pub dates. My book, Sister is coming out the same day as hers. That's so much fun. So it's being published by St Martin's Press in North America and Orion in the UK. Born in England and raised in Canada, Natalie recently founded the independent bookstore Archetype Books in Oakville, Ontario, where she lives with her family and 2 rescue dogs. Go Oakville authors! Jennifer Hillier, whom you may also know, is also in Oakville. So much fun. A lifelong devotee of all things Jane Austen, the Jane Austen Society is her first published novel. Now, Natalie is also an excellent cook. She threw the most sumptuous dinner one evening in Oakville last summer, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I could have stayed there in her back garden. You could have adopted me, honestly, Natalie. I would have been so happy to stay. So her book, The Jane Austen Society, is getting a lot of buzz, and for good reason. So let me tell you about these accolades that have come in. It is one of Goodreads' 33 most anticipated novels of 2020 and big books of spring. It is one of the Nerd Daily's most anticipated 2020 book releases. It got a starred review from the Library Journal and a starred review from Booklist. It's a May 2020 Library Reads pick and has been mentioned in Entertainment Weekly, Parade, Travel and Leisure, Business Insider, Romper and Bookstore. Now, if that doesn't do it for you, I can't help you. Because this is a gorgeous book and I'm very excited. And it's raining now. This is so weird. So here's the cover again. Let me get that properly. There we go. Wonderful. Now I am slightly nervous to read this one because the audiobook is actually performed by the seriously talented Richard Armitage, and his voice is just, we decided it's like butter, I think, didn't we, Natalie? His voice is just so deep and rich and gorgeous. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to compete with that, nor will I try. And here's the other funny thing. I was reading this and yesterday, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic because it's set in England, because yesterday we had a book set in LA and I've read books set in Chicago, and all my gangsters sound really, really posh. And I thought, brilliant, you know, and I read the first chapter, and would you believe there's an American character in it? So I am not going to embarrass myself and do an American accent, because my husband and I were in stitches last night. I was trying to do an American accent and I sound like Sandy Cheeks from SpongeBob. So unless you want me to read a character in that voice, I'm not going to. But I shall now stop my typical babbling, which I always do anyway, and read you the first chapter, part of the first chapter of the Jane Austen Society. So this is the Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner, Chapter 1. Chawton, Hampshire, June 1932. He lay back on the stone wall, knees pulled up, and stretched out his spine against the rock. The birdsong pierced the early morning air in little shrieks that hammered at his very skull. Lying there, still, face turned flat upwards to the sky, he could feel death all around him in the small church graveyard. He must have looked like an effigy himself, resting on top of the wall, as if carved into permanent silence, abreast a silent tomb. He had never left his small village to see the great cathedrals of his country, but he knew from books how the sculpted ancient rulers lay just like this, atop their elevated shrines, for lower men like himself to gaze at centuries later in awe. It was haying season, and he had left his wagon in the lane, right where it met the Kissing Gate and the farm fields at the end of Old Gosport Road. Huge bundles of hay had already been piled up high on the back of the wagon, waiting for transport to the horse and dairy farms that dotted the outer vicinity of the village, stretching in a row from Alton to East Tisted. As he lay there, he could feel the back of his shirt, damp from sweat, even though the sun was pale and barely trying. At just 9 in the morning, he had already been hard at work in the fields for several hours. The multitude of finches, robins and tits suddenly quietened down as if on command, and he closed his eyes. His dog had been on guard until that moment, looking out over the mossy stone wall at the sheep that dotted the fields below, just past the hidden ha-ha that marked the perimeter of the estate. But as the farmer's laboured breath became deep and rhythmic with sleep, the dog took his own cue and lay down beneath his master in the cool dirt of the graveyard. "Excuse me." He jolted awake at the voice now resonant above him, a lady's voice, an American voice. Sitting up, he swung his legs down from the stone wall to stand before her. He looked at her face quickly, glanced at the rest of her, then, just as quickly, looked away. She appeared to be quite young, no older than her early 20s. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat with an indigo blue ribbon tied about it that matched the deep blue of her tailored dress. She looked quite tall, almost the same height as him, until he realised she was wearing the highest pair of heels he had ever seen. In one hand, She held a pamphlet, in the other a black clutch purse, and around her neck hung a tiny cross on a short silver chain. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but you're the first person I've met all morning, and I'm quite lost, you see." As a lifelong resident of Chawton, population 377, the man was not surprised. He was always one of the first villagers up and about in the morning, right behind the milkman, Dr. Gray on his more pressing rounds, and the postman doing his pick-up from the local office. "You see," she repeated, starting to adjust to his natural reticence, "I came down for the day from London. I took the train out here from Winchester to see the home of the writer Jane Austen, but I can't find it. And I saw this little parish church from the road and decided to have a look around, to find some more trace of her, if I could." The man looked behind his right shoulder at the church, the same church he had attended all his life, made of local flint and red sandstone, and sheltered by beech and elm trees. It had been rebuilt a few generations ago. Nothing notable was left inside of Jane Austen or her immediate family. He turned and looked back now, over his left shoulder, at the small stile at the rear of the churchyard, through which one could just glimpse towering yew hedges clipped into circular cones. Even as a boy they had looked to him like nothing so much as extremely large salt and pepper cellars. The hedges ran along the south terrace garden of an imposing Elizabethan house set on an incline, with a gable tiled roof, red brickwork, and a 3-storey Tudor porch covered in vines. "The big house is back there," he said abruptly, "just past the church. The great house it's called, where the Knight family lives. Miss Austen's mother and sister's graves are right here. Do you see, miss, alongside the church wall?" Her face lit up in gratitude, both for the information and for his slow warming to their conversation. "Oh, my goodness, I had no idea." Then her eyes began to well up. She was the most striking human being he had ever met, like a model in a hair or soap advertisement in the papers. As the tears started, the colour of her eyes crystallised into something he had never seen before, a shade of blue, almost like violet, while the tears caught on rows of inky black lashes, blacker even than her hair. Looking away, he tried to step around her carefully, his dog, Ryder, now nipping about his muddy boots. He walked over until he was standing next to the 2 large slabs of stone that stood upright in the ground. She followed him, the heels of her black pumps sticking a bit in the graveyard dirt, and he watched as she silently mouthed the words carved onto the twin tombstones. Backing away, he fiddled about to find his cap from his pocket. Brushing back the lock of light blonde hair that tended to fall across his brow as he worked, he tucked it up under the rim of the cap as he pulled it forward and down over his eyes. He wanted to be away from her now, from the strange emotion being stirred up in her by the unadorned graves of simple women dead these past 100 years. Off he wandered, to wait with Ryder by the main lich gate to the churchyard. After several minutes she finally appeared from around the corner of the church, this time stopping to read the inscription of every stone she passed, as if hoping to discover even more slumbering souls of note. Every so often she would teeter a bit as the heel caught the edge of a stone, and she would grimace just so slightly at her own clumsiness, but her eyes never left the graves below. She stopped at the lich gate next to him and looked back with a contented sigh. She was smiling now, and more composed, so composed that he finally picked up the whiff of money in both her poise and her manners. "I'm so sorry about that. I just wasn't prepared. You see, I came all this way to find the cottage where she wrote the books, the little table, the creaking door," she added, but to no visible reaction. "I couldn't find out much about any of this while in London. Thank you so much for telling me." He held the lich gate open for her, and they started to walk back towards the main road together. "I can take you to her house if you like. It's barely a mile or so up the lane. I've done my morning haying for the farm before it gets too hot, so I've got time to spare." She smiled. A great, big, white, winning smile. The kind of smile he could only imagine being American. "That is awfully kind of you. Thank you. You know, I was assuming people came here all the time, like me. Like this. Do they?" He shrugged as he kept his pace slow to meet hers along the half-mile gravel drive that led down to the road from the great house. "Often enough, I guess. Nothing really much to see, though. It's just workers' flats now at the cottage. Tenants in all the rooms." He turned to see her face tighten in disappointment, as if to cheer her up. Before he even knew what had come over him, he asked her about the books. "I'm not even sure I can answer that," she replied, as he pointed the way back down the country lane, opposite the end where his wagon sat, with its load temporarily forgotten. "I just feel, when I reread her, which I do more than any other author, it's as if she's inside my head, like music. My father first read the books to me when I was very young. He died when I was 12, and I hear his voice too when I read her. Nothing made him laugh out loud, nothing, the way those books did." He listened to her rambling on, then shook his head as if in disbelief. "You haven't read her?" the woman asked, a disbelieving light in her own eyes meeting his. "Can't say I've too much interest. Stick to Haggard and the like. Adventure stories, you know. Suppose you might judge me for that." I would never judge anyone for what they read." She caught the ironic look on his face and added with another broad smile, "Although I guess I just did. All the same, I never understood how a bunch of books about girls looking for husbands could be on par with the great writers, Tolstoy and such." She looked at him with new interest. "You've read Tolstoy?" "Used to. I was going to be sent up to study during the war, but both my brothers got called to fight. I stayed back here to help out." "Do you all work the farm together now?" He looked away. "No, miss. They're both dead now. The war." He liked to say the words like that, like a clean cut, sharp and deep and irrevocable, as if trying to stave off any further conversation. But he had the feeling that with her, this approach might only invite more questions, so he quickly continued. "By the way, see those two roads where they meet? You came in from Winchester from the left, yeah? Well, stick along here to the right. That's now the main road to London, and you come in Chawton proper. That there's the cottage up ahead." "Oh, that's really awfully kind of you, thank you. But you must read the books, you must. I mean, you live here, how can you not?" He wasn't used to this kind of emotional persuasion. He just wanted to get back to his wagon of hay and be gone. "Just promise me, Mr.
Adam. The name's Adam."
"Mary Ann," she replied, extending her hand to shake his goodbye. "Start with Pride and Prejudice, of course, and then Emma. She's my favourite. So bold, yet so wonderfully oblivious. Please?" He shrugged again, tipped his cap at her, and started to walk off down the lane. He dared to look back only once, from just past the pond where the two roads met. He saw her still standing there, tall and slender in the midnight blue, staring at the red brick cottage at its bricked-up window and the white front door opening straight onto the lane. That was a bit of a fluffed-up version. Sorry about that. I'm having some trouble with the light seeing. Jeez. Sorry, Natalie. But that was the sumptuous, gorgeous part of the first chapter of the sumptuous, gorgeous The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. Publishes on May 26th. You don't want to miss this one. It's absolutely beautiful, and Natalie is seriously talented and getting so much recognition and accolades for this book, and so well deserved. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. Tomorrow, let me tell you a little bit more about, and if you've just joined, please, Natalie is listening and watching on Instagram, I believe, but certainly on Facebook. And I'll save these, and you can ask her comments, ask her about her writing, ask her about her fascination for Jane Austen, because she's such a huge fan. Ask her, we can't really ask her what the inspiration was, because obviously it was Jane Austen, but maybe why. So that would be lovely if you could leave her some comments and some questions. That's always great. So let me tell you about tomorrow's book. Tomorrow's book is another thriller called No Bad Deed by Heather Chavez, and I am very excited to read this one to you as well. It will be, as always, at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on my Instagram Live and on my Facebook Live. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode of First Chapter Fun, and that you will join me again tomorrow. And please, until then, as always, stay safe, stay kind, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching.